I hope you've all enjoyed the talks from our three speakers today. While you're organising your thoughts into some probing questions, I'd like to welcome our panel to the stage. Everett Davis is a protection expert at London & Country Mortgages. He's been in the industry for 7 years, working for firms such as LifeSearch and Alexander Hall before London & Country. If you were here last year for the awards, you will have seen him win our Young Achiever Award, and if you've spoken to him for any length of time, you'll know he's an Arsenal fan. The two are not connected, I promise. Paul Yates is Product Strategy Director at iPipeline. He has over 30 years' experience in product strategy and business development leadership roles. His focus is on driving business strategy and transformational growth, providing a portfolio of innovative technology solutions for advisors and providers to drive down costs in the advice, sales and servicing processes. I was delighted to have him as a speaker last year and equally thrilled to get his input as a panellist this year, so backed by popular demand. Caroline Froud has over 40 years' experience in the life and health industry, working as Chief Underwriter and Head of Claims for a leading UK reassurance company for 25 years prior to joining Guardian. Caroline was the Secretary and Treasurer of Select 74 for 18 years and founder member of the Lucid Committee for 6 years. And finally, Toby Bainbridge, who joined the Exeter as Head of Insurance Solutions in 2023. Over the last 20 years, he's held various positions at the leading insurance firms, including Royal London, LV, Munich Re and Legal & General. His roles have spanned most disciplines in the life insurance world, from marketing to data science, so we're sure you'll have plenty of insights today. So welcome, panel. So we are here to consider diversity and exclusion, which means we're also talking about inclusion. Paul, if I can start with you as a seasoned pro on stage, do you think we have provided diversity and inclusion in the last 5 years as an industry?
I think I'm going to reference a title of a film actually that is from 1966, which is old even for me, which is The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, really. I'll start with the good, because we have done some really good stuff. And the protection sector, I think, is a bright spot in the financial services world, where we have seen women coming into leadership and advisory roles and really drive forward. And actually, as a strong beacon for the rest of the industry to look at. And to that point, I actually did keep looking down, it's because I was given a load of stats by my data team. Our data does show that there are far more diverse advisor titles in the industry. So over the last 5 years, the title Mr. represented about 76% in 2019. It's now down to 67%. So actually we are seeing a shift, still very male orientated, but we are seeing a shift, and that is a great thing for us. And we have seen, during COVID, we did see a very big push up into the gender parity of protection policies bought. Not necessarily the same value, but there's parity. It rose to about 48.5% is now for females. And again, that has stayed. So it didn't fall off after COVID. We have managed to keep that going. So again, really good. And I also believe that you can see from our products that, I believe that because we now have a much larger number of multi-benefit and IPs, that they are much more suited to a much more diverse audience. If I come to the ugly, though, I would have to say that we are not, I believe, serving a much wider range of customers at all. And I would, and if I look at, again, from our data, you can see that the shift to wealthier clients has continued in total. So, the median salary has risen from 27 5 years ago to 34,000. And that's just, whilst some of that's down to the cost of living, it's still 0.8% higher than the ONS stats. So it still shows some shift in our clients being to a higher wealth segment. We've also seen a reduction in the number of And we've also seen the number of self-employed reduced from 12.1 to about 11.4. So again, that could be COVID related. But it's something where we have seen that shift away from what we were getting. It was a good penetration into self-employed clients. So I think, what do I think? I think we have done some good work. There's still a long way to go.
I wonder if others on the panel agree. Feel free to chip in. If not, then Toby.
It's hard because I got the stats.
Can't really dispute that, to be honest.
So Toby, if I can come to you next. If we're aiming to appeal to and to serve a wider base of customers, does the way that underwriters think narrow our ability to do this?
I would definitely argue yes. So I came from an underwriting background 30 odd years ago, and I've led underwriting teams or had people who led underwriting teams for me for 10 plus years. We train people in a particular way, and then we get surprised when they follow their training. So we train them to look for risks, we train them to look at complex medical underwriting, and then come to a conclusion. I think if you take a step back, often they're just working to a brief. Right? So it's usually sort of senior management who are telling them, what do I want you to do? So tighten up, loosen up. And generally over the last 10 years, I've spent way more time tightening up than I have loosening, if I'm being honest. And a lot of that's built around price. Because I know that if, rough rule of thumb, I put my prices up by 1%, I'm going to lose 5% of volume. Right? So if I put my prices up by 5%, I'm going to lose about a quarter of my volume out the door on a standard term assurance book. So actually forcing the costs down becomes really important. And in that case, it becomes a game of actually trying to be as tight as possible within some boundaries. So you end up almost being exclusionary by design. However, right? That's the game you probably have to play if you're looking for a large amount of volume. I think if you're going to see more inclusionary type products, I think it probably is going to come from the mutual sector and from the smaller insurers, because actually they don't really have to hit profit targets as hard and for as long a period as you would if you were working at one of the big firms like L&G and Aviva and etc. And I'm not singling them out because I worked at some of them, and it's entirely a reasonable way of approaching it. But actually, if you want to sort of, as Katie was saying, if you want a more solidarity-related product type, then actually it's probably going to come there because those mutuals think in a slightly different way, and they'll approach it as, this is because we want to be a mutual. This is expressing our purpose. We will be more inclusionary. Again, that will come down from senior management telling the underwriters to loosen up, basically.
Any other thoughts, Caroline?
Yeah. I also think so I've been around for quite a long time doing underwriting, and I also think that the art of underwriting has been diminished, and that where we used to be able to have a gut feeling and say, that feels like 120 or that feels like a 50 or whatever it might be, that has just been removed from us. And I believe a lot of that stems from our reassurance partners. We have to have reassurance, and I think that reassurance have done, and I come from a reassurance background, and I think that we, as reassurers, we've said people have to be audited. QA is everywhere, and so the underwriters are QA'd all the time. They're afraid to make a decision that is sometimes outside of the box. They feel they have to follow guidelines, and I was taught by somebody who said they're not guidelines, they're not godlines, they're guidelines. That's what they should be. They're just a guide. And I think that underwriting has lost some of its spark because we're driven so much by, yeah, absolutely. We've got to make a profit somewhere. We've got to make, we can't lose money constantly. And I think it's a real shame, to be honest. So underwriters want to do the best. They want to include people. They want people to get the cover. That's what it's all about. So we try very hard, and we often get the sharp end of the stick, I'm afraid.
Yeah, you do.
Would you say that the workload of underwriters is much higher now?
Sorry, shouldn't laugh at that.
I would say that the workload is more complex. So UREs have done a great job with STP, and I mean every talking about cycles of stuff. We're always saying we're not going to need underwriters soon because it's all going to be done by the rules engine, and AI will probably do some of that, but there will always be the need for a human to pick it up and actually make a decision. So I wouldn't say necessarily workload has increased, but I would say the complexity of the cases that are coming across an underwriter's desk have certainly increased. Things take longer. Don't get me started on GPs. I just, I could go on forever about this, but GPs for me they're the real business prevention officers around here. It's not the underwriters anymore. And I think that if we could only get the collaboration with the insurance industry and the BMA again, then that would not be a bad thing. Paying a doctor hundreds of pounds to write nil of note on a report is scandalous, I think, and I think we should be doing something about that.
On a similar theme, if I can stay with you, Caroline, we've touched on the issue of mental health, and Katie talked about it not being a black and white issue. I think it's something we're going to need to develop our thinking on clearly in light of generations coming through. Do you think something like the right to be forgotten will be implemented in the UK? And perhaps you could share some of your thinking around why or why not?
Well, it's already been implemented in other countries across Europe, and the ABI have got a group working on it and looking at it for the UK market. Ireland is already there. So I think it's probably inevitable that in some guise there will be a right to be forgotten situation in the UK for the insurance industry too. But we have to think really hard and long about it, I think, that we don't want something forced upon us. And so, again, the industry needs to be collaborative with this, and they need to work out what it is that they really want. But we need to understand that at the moment, because there is a pool, then people who have had cancer in the past are paying what deemed an appropriate price for that risk that they're bringing to that pool. So in my view, if we are going to go down the route of a right to be forgotten, then prices are going to go up, and that's going to make the advisor's job even more difficult. But I think it will come. I think it will come.
Can I slightly disagree?
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry.
Definitely, please do.
Which is, so we went through the whole gender neutrality pricing thing, and there was so much argument going on around the industry, especially in the sort of pricing teams, about what was actually going to happen. And all that really happened is aggregate prices went up by about 1.5 points. And then over the space of the next year, that 1.5 went. So I think with the right to be forgotten thing, we will have technical discussions about what exactly the impact is going to be. But ultimately, just prices will just gently go up a little bit, and then competition will gently force them down.
I suppose it's how broad that right to be forgotten is. So if we just stick with cancer, then I would agree. If we're saying somebody's had to complete a treatment for 10 years, and then they have the right to be forgotten, most people are getting close to standard terms for life cover anyway, so the difference is it's not going to really, I don't think it will probably cause that much of a problem. If it gets dragged into IP and CI, then we could be in a different position, and if it broadens out to other conditions, so if it was decided that MI would come in, or stroke, or all sorts of other conditions, then I think it could have a bigger bearing.
I agree with you. I just think that the quantum of price change just moves up a bit more. We just end up adjusting, don't we?
Yeah, yep.
Right, so Everic, I'd like to come to you if I may, but just a warning for the audience that I'm going to open the floor up to questions after this. So we've talked so far about customers, but it starts with us as an industry. What can we do to encourage a more diverse workforce, given that if we're a more diverse industry, we're more likely to naturally serve a more diverse customer base?
How a more diverse workforce would definitely help the industry is that people that are speaking to themselves similarly to themselves. So as an example, if someone's, has been, a single mother, for example, who's working in the industry, or they might come across someone who's had, a bout of postnatal depression is a very common disclosure I come across, especially when advising on income protection especially, they could probably best advise on which insurer is going to be best for that, because, different insurers have different underwriting stances on that. But kind of tying into, underwriting and all those kind of issues with income protection, it's kind of like, really, I think it's quite unfair that we don't take a more kind of like case-by-case basis, especially when it comes to mental health. And just in terms of how things have changed, in terms of how open people are with mental health in general, there's kind of like, blanket exclusions on if you've had postnatal depression because you've given birth and, it's only been about for 3 months, why is there then a whole mental health exclusion on that policy? Or it could be someone who's lost a parent, for example, they've gone through a period of counselling, not necessarily on medication, but they're just having a hard time getting over for a loss of a parent, which would definitely affect someone. I think, again, having more, diverse people from different backgrounds who can kind of share their experiences and stuff along those lines can, then help, essentially more people taking out protection and understanding of how, it can best protect them when the worst happens, essentially.
Yeah, so showing our empathetic side as an industry.
Absolutely.
Right, so whether you're a mutual, whether you have views on the right to be forgotten, if you have a question, now is the time to raise your hand and ask our panel or make a point. Stunned silence.
Excellent.
Oh, there's a question here. Microphone's just coming to you.
Thank you. I wanted to ask a question about consumer duty, because now as advisors, we have to listen to the clients, take in their sort of surroundings and their history, and come to an assumption if we can actually give them advice based on their current circumstances, which can actually impact inclusivity and diversity. Because if we're speaking to a client who's just gone through a divorce, should we actually be advising them at this moment or doing it later? How do you feel consumer duty has impacted diversity and inclusivity?
Who wants to jump in first?
I can jump in that I do believe that people are being driven up the price level of just being able to deal with clients, because it's an extra cost, it's an extra piece of process, and therefore people are looking at their client bank and are cutting them to wealthier clients or clients with greater value. So that's going to keep going on if that's the process, if you keep rolling that regulation on. I'm hopeful from Rachel Reeves' view that that she's saying, look, we need to grow financial services and we need less red tape and less process, that it'll come down. It's not our experience, but definitely I think consumer duty is an extra layer. I think from my point of view, I can't read anything in consumer duty that I really disagree with, though. Treating the clients as they should be, as if they're part of your family, sounds sensible to me. But I just look at it and go, the problem is it's an extra lot of costs, it's an extra layer of things that I think is driving some firms to go to higher value clients.
Everett, can I come to you for the advisor perspective? Do you feel that consumer duty is making you a more inclusive advisor?
Yeah, I mean, it's never bad to do right by the customer. I think ultimately that's what consumer duty is all about, essentially. You want to always make sure you have the best outcomes for your client, and essentially the domino effect is the best outcome for their family. So again, it ties into like loads of different people are in different situations. There's one single breadwinner of the family, or there's again a single parent with 2 children. You want to make sure consumer duty essentially is the umbrella over that to make sure you are always giving the best advice suited and tailored to your client's needs.
Yeah. Right. Emma has a question here. Andy, if we could have the mic.
Hi, great panel discussion, by the way. I think for me, that we've tried things in the past that seem, that have actually been quite useful in terms of inclusivity. So for those of you that might have worked at Bupa or selling products when Bupa was still around, for those living with cancer, you could actually have still taken out some critical illness cover. It's diabetes, and everything was pretty much excluded apart from cancer, but it actually enabled people with living with diabetes to get cover. I've had cancer, as many of you know, which means that I can't actually get critical illness cover. Why am I more of a risk of actually having all of those other things? And And I just think there's a real balance between, is it lack of ambition, caution, philosophy, or, you know, the philosophical approach, or is it technology that's actually holding some of these things back? Because you've got things like exclusions that might not actually be quite shaping the risk, things that could get excluded that are more broad, when actually we should be narrowing down what the actual risk is. And it's just interesting how, you know, we are not really able to actually offer as much cover as possible because of those things, I think. And I think, as I said, we have tried stuff in the past, but we don't necessarily then keep moving forwards. We kind of then go, well, that didn't work. Why didn't it work? And some of those ideas, I think, are a bit before their time. And I think we sometimes need to go back, look at what we've actually got today, the learnings that we've got, and we have got insurers kind of breaking the mold, which is wonderful. But then why are other insurers not following when that is actually working and improving the inclusivity that we've got in the market?
So I'm going to start with the two insurers on the panel to share their thoughts.
Do you want to go first, or do you want?
No, I'd love you to go first.
I take your point, especially on the sort of cancer exclusions and wide-ranging exclusions. Cards on table, I've never been a big fan of the full-on mental health exclusion. Let's just exclude the back, because it's often I've always felt, and I'm not an underwriter anymore, that it was the lazy option, to be quite honest. But changing the way underwriters think about that stuff is actually really culturally quite difficult. And you are going to get some of those wrong. So if you narrow the exclusion, you will end up paying some claims around the edges, which personally I think is fine, because that's what we're here to do. As long as it doesn't get too widely out of whack, then you can probably just swallow it in. It's just a claims experience. But it does mean that those cases do end up getting whacked on your desk, and I've definitely had that done to me in the past when I was a practicing underwriter in the why the hell did you take this on? So I know what the fear is of not putting on wide-ranging exclusions, but I do take your point. I personally think it's often quite lazy, and we really do need to address it and make sure that they're much more specific. About the sort of postnatal depression stuff, yeah, so I've seen people put full-on mental health exclusions in relation to postnatal depression, and it usually only gets onto my desk when somebody's really kicking off about it. And you can look at it and go, I absolutely get that. And I've certainly seen that with bereavement and all sorts of other things, which wouldn't traditionally be called mental health issues, and someone's put a mental health exclusion on them. I think as an industry, we're getting a bit more aware of that sort of issue, and I'm certainly hearing from my peer group that people want to actually change and move into them more specific.
I think it's a really good question as well, because that kind of ties into what the gentleman said about, you know, consumer duty, and also Katie as well. And does consumer duty count, you know, also apply to the people that can't get cover, or does it only just apply to the people that can actually get into the pool, essentially, for yourself? Because, you know, that lovely lady over there has every right to get protection as well, and she's being penalised that she's, you know, essentially had a cancer diagnosis. She's clearly made a full recovery, so why is it that she can't get protection? Does consumer duty also apply to her because, you know, she can't get protection, you know? So it's a lot of, again, red tape and, you know, grey areas and what we can and can't do and stuff like that. But I think it's again, it probably just ties back to how things have normally been, and again, you know, having the entrepreneurial spirit to make these changes and challenge, you know, the status quo of what has been, essentially.
I would also, to your point, Emma, say that some systems are much more constrained, so therefore they can't just flex out or give us as many options as other systems. I say that, but a lot of the technology is improving in our market. You know, and LV's just going through and doing that themselves at the moment, and to improve their platforms. I also wonder if we've got enough light on those areas like exclusions and who's doing what at all stages. I mean, the experts, you know, Alan's business will know all of that, but for the general market, is there enough light on any exclusions, or, you know, or any of that sort of those ratings and everything else, and just being able to show people it is a competitive market rather than a hidden market after the initial price.
I just want to leave you with a question posed by the FCA Chief Exec, Nikhil Rathi, quoted by Health and Protection recently, which is, do we accept the risk of a few experiments failing or some people not benefiting from innovation is outweighed by the potential benefits to the majority of consumers and long-term growth and productivity improvements? So there is your lunchtime discussion topic. Thank you.